Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Want to spend the night in a really haunted house? It was Fastidious Ted who said that. Said that to me, his rather less fastidious friend. Call me Will, short for Wilbur. Yeah. What, I said. You mean like one of those places decorated like for Halloween? No, this place is supposed to be really haunted. There have been numerous reports of paranormal and poltergeist activity. I don't believe in ghosts, I said. No? No, I said firmly. If it was possible to come back from the dead, there'd be a million guys like me coming back to haunt people they hated. You wouldn't be able to move around for ghosts. But when you die, you move to a higher spiritual plane, Ted answered primly. Yeah. Right. Still, I had nothing going on that night, so Ted and I went to visit a haunted house. It was actually a haunted B&B. As befits a haunted house, there was a lot of old Victorian furniture, upholstered in maroon and other dark shades, and walls covered with wallpaper of similar hue, all augmented by wood paneling, blackened with age. Yeah. Even worse, they served sherry before dinner. Yeah, sherry. Not even Amontillado. Well, at least the dinner was good. There were 4 other guests, a very, very middle-aged couple, and 2 attractive young women who only talked to each other, and definitely not to me. Our hosts were Lenore, a cadaverous brunette with alabaster white skin offset by her tight-fitting black dress, and George, I think that was his name, whose wide, staring eyes reminded me of the old horror movie actor George Zucco. That or Uncle Fester. When the meal was over, we went into the parlor, and the avuncular George gave us the history of the place. The Ambrose House, also known as the Yellow House, so called from the color of its distinctive brick exterior, was built in 1906 by Harry Ambrose, a wealthy businessman, as a home for his new bride, Evelyn. Sadly, Ambrose was shot dead on the front steps on August the 7th, 1908, while Evelyn watched in horror. It was her first visit to the house, and Harry had planned to carry her over the threshold. Harry's murderer was one Tyrus Vance, a rejected suitor of Evelyn's who had become obsessed with her. He was hanged for Harry's murder in 1909. Evelyn remarried, but her second husband, Roger Dixon, died on the Western Front in 1915, and Evelyn herself was carried off during the Spanish flu epidemic 3 years later, but not before giving birth to a son, Percy. Percy was raised in Ambrose House by an elderly maiden aunt. He was a strange, sickly, reclusive boy whose innate peculiarities were made worse by his aunt's obsessive and paranoid behavior. She believed that servants were always stealing from her, and was known to creep the darkened halls at night, trying to catch them in the act. Needless to say, good help, and soon any help, was impossible to find. As a result, the pair soon lived alone in increasing squalor, having less and less contact with the local people. Groceries were delivered to the house and left on the front steps, and that was as close as anyone got for many, many years. It was only when the delivery boy realized that the previous month's groceries were still on the steps that an investigation was made, and the bodies were found. The interior of the house was a shambles. Percy's body had been decomposing during the hottest months of the year and was now little more than a grease stain, while his aunt was only a skeleton. But those weren't the only bones they found. In fact, the basement was full of them, a regular ossuary. It wasn't known if Percy, for he was the one blamed, it wasn't known if Percy had dug them up from nearby cemeteries, or if he had done something worse. The area had experienced a number of mysterious disappearances, especially of young women, but ultimately no real connection between Percy and the missing people was ever established. Afterwards, the house devolved onto various relations, none of whom prospered under its roof. There were rumors of alcoholism, mental illness, divorce, even suicide. The evil or unlucky Ambrose house was eventually abandoned and fell into a state of decrepitude until Lenore and I bought it for a song, George concluded with a rather predatory smile. We had felt full and reasonably content, so the backstory of Ambrose house made an unpleasant dessert. I suppose a Ouija board session was inevitable. Of course, I got roped into playing, into participating, Ted being above such frivolity. 4 of us placed our fingers on the planchette. The attractive young women, and the gaunt, pale Lenore, and me. It was cool to be the only guy. I guess. Lenore asked the standard first question. Is there anyone there? The planchette moved immediately to yes. I don't know about the others, but I wasn't pushing it. Honest. Next question. Who are you? The planchette swung back and forth across the board and spelled out P-E-R-C-Y. Percy. Percy. Great. All the spirits in the hereafter, and we wind up with a serial killer? Naturally, Lenore had to ask Percy what he wanted, and the pointer spelled out K-I-L-L. And, stupidly, I had to ask, so, who do you want to kill, Perce? Yeah, you guessed it. The damn planchette moved to spell will, and you can bet I wasn't pushing it to do that. Who knows what would have happened, but at that precise moment, the parlor door opened on its own accord and slammed shut with a reverberating bang. We jumped to our feet, the Ouija board falling to the floor. We heard footsteps in the hall, footsteps approaching the door, and in a moment we heard someone knock. Come in, I said instinctively. George stiffened. You shouldn't have done that, he whispered. I was going to ask, why not? When the door swung open again, very slowly, very slowly. Both Lenore and George looked like they were about to wet themselves. Eyes wide, bright and starting to bug out, George announced in a quavering voice, "It is now midnight. I suggest, for everyone's safety, it's time to retire for the evening." And everybody dutifully trooped upstairs. I didn't even have time for another cheap sherry. But before we all entered our respective rooms, Lenore intoned, "You may become aware of activity outside your rooms, especially tonight, which seems charged with supernal energy. But under no circumstances leave your room before morning. More than your life may depend on it." And with that, she wished us good evening and pleasant dreams. Ted and I were sharing, as no one was supposed to be alone in this supposedly haunted house. Normally, I would have expected him to bitch about the food, the accommodation, the booze, the other guests. But tonight, he was strangely subdued. We lay down on our separate beds and waited for the games to begin. We figured they would stage some kind of ghostly performance. Except now, we weren't all that positive it would be a performance. So we lay there as the darkness took control, listening to nothing. Silence, profound, deathly silence, broken, after a time, by a barrage of raucous snores emanating from Ted. In fact, he was snoring at such a high decibel level, I thought the furniture would start rattling. "If that noise doesn't wake the dead, I don't know what would," I said to myself. I actually started to hope something would happen. Something would happen to either wake him up or drown him out. But I didn't have long to wait. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the opening of a door, then furtive footsteps, at first far away, but then drawing steadily closer, closer, as they moved up the stairs and into the hallway, when the sound was replaced with peals of maniacal, uproarious laughter. The ghost, the thing, Percy, whatever, whoever, came bounding down the hall, crashing down on the hardwood flooring as if leaping or dancing. And then it began pounding on the doors, and I heard screaming and the sound of splintering wood. The room began to fill with a fetid stench, far worse than Ted's usual flatulence. I tried calling out to Ted as he lay there, oblivious in spite of the horrible cacophony, only to find my voice wouldn't work. Then I attempted to get up, but found I couldn't move. And that's when the door swung open, wide open. A man stood in the doorway. He was short, slight, and balding, with an amused, or bemused, expression on his round, pale face. He looked like he would commence drooling if he opened his thin lips. But it was his wide, ice-blue eyes that arrested my attention. They were protuberant, hysterical, insane. His eyes had my attention. His eyes, and the long, sharp knife he held in his hands. "Who are you?" I said, telepathically, as I was still unable to speak. "Percy," he answered. "Percy." The sound had a weird, hollow quality, more like a recording than the sound of an actual voice. "Why are you here?" I said, again, telepathically. "Kill," he said. "Kill." And then he closed the door behind him. At first light, the others stepped into the hallway and began talking to each other with great animation, as if frantic for human contact. Most were wearing the same clothes from the previous evening, suggesting they had slept in them. Lenore and George soon put in their dark appearance. "How did you guys do all that? Those special effects? They were amazing," the middle-aged man said. George looked at him sharply, coldly. "Those were not special effects," he sniffed. "Is everyone here?" Lenore blurted. The group did a quick head count. "Where are those two men?" one of the young women said. George stepped forward and rapped on our door with his knuckles. "Hello," he cried. "Are you awake?" Ted just lay there, not even snoring. He must have been really knocked out. I myself felt pretty groggy, not wanting to move. I tried to speak, but something seemed to be stuck in my throat. I heard a key turn in the lock. Then George was in the room and vomiting all over the rug. "Oh my God, look at the blood!" someone cried, while a middle-aged man bellowed, "Their throats have been cut!" And then I knew why Ted wasn't snoring, and why I felt like something was stuck in my throat. Percy had slit them. In fact, he was in the room, an arch smile cutting across his lopsided face. I realized no one else could see him or hear him when he said, "Now do you believe in ghosts?" "Yes," I answered. "I am one." "Yes," Percy said, "you are one. And ready for some fun?" "I'm ready," I said, smiling. "Well, about as well as you can smile when your throat has been cut." And then I added, "A haunting we will go," while Ted commenced some astral snoring, and the screaming began for real. The moral of the story? You don't believe in ghosts? Boo! If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing and help me to reach my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. Today's yarn is the first part of a proposed trilogy, and I will write and record the next two parts if I can get 150 views and 30 likes of today's video. So please share it with all your friends and be sure to drop a like. Till midnight. Cheers. Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix Here, that's PX Here, while the music is the bone-chilling The Dread by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.